He's always going to come.
All right. Well,
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, yesterday we had I didn't know. Well, I worked today. I get paid.
oh, that's right. You did say
There was a male cousin. Really? Oh, yeah. You see, you know, it was down to, you know where Bear Village is? It's over there on Holland Street. Bear Village, it's like a big Missouri State. Yeah, 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 yeah. Man, and it was a man, I was like, the old restrooms were still there.
yeah. What did you have to do?
Vote. Just, I was a judge. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty simple. You know, you have to read this book. And then take a look at it. But it's, and you just get how to do this thing. And two Republicans, two Democrats.
It's still going on.
No, it's on. Yeah. It was 17 hours. It started on like about, 6 to 7, but I got there about 5:40. Yeah. For this time, until November, then the big one. And it'll be busy. And I'll probably, I just like, man, you get. And I told him my story that I read. Yeah, this one guy, he brought a Bible. It's not a Bible. And some other girl walked up and said, oh, I like that one. And I really like the other one. You know, I was like, oh, okay. Wow, we got some vowels there. Ooh, where's Cliff? You know, I was like, I need somebody. Oh, man, these people. Oh, my gosh. Yes, they don't have any. No. Keep it up. You smoked that wacky today? Oh, yeah, they were smoking. Yeah. Good. That keeps me warm. Oh. Okay. We had some love coffee. It is great. You know, it's like, what a world. I didn't see his husband, but he said, you know what he said. I'm like, okay. Well, he wasn't. Yeah, but maybe his, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. He wasn't there. No. Well, I mean, I can't bring anything. And children, I guess you can bring them, but they got to be outside or be yeah, yeah. It was a definitely experience. And I've done it before. This one, yesterday. Yeah. Then a guy that was like a city county clerk, he come in there and told us our taxes are going to raise. Hey, Joe. Oh. Yeah.
This must be the 8-inch car.
Yeah.
seen him since last. I think he well, I know sometimes when he's walking, he has shoes on.
We are glad that you are here. Our crowd is down. It's usually down if it's rainy, although we didn't have that much. My understanding, though, is that people down toward Branson had a whole lot more. And so Evan Brown is hoping he does not get the phone call to go to work, which sometimes happens. But bad weather a lot of times goes around Springfield, and that's a good thing. Our speaker tonight is Roye Cole. Roye is Jack's son. Of course, Jack was here several weeks ago. I don't remember when. They are both very much into public service. Jack is the mayor of Rogersville. Roye thinks that Jack is paid a token amount for being mayor. Now, Roye is full-time. Roye is Webster County Sheriff. So he has a full-time job, but he probably has a job that most of us would not want. And I'm sure that there are many times that he wishes he didn't have it either. But we need those people. And as time goes by, I think we are seeing more and more how we need them. You may have seen a video or heard about a man who tried to hold up a 7-Eleven in Stockton, California. The employees at the store, they were Indians, they detained him and they beat him with a broomstick. Who do you now think is in trouble? The guys who beat him with the broomstick. They're the ones in trouble. Let's hope that that attitude never gets here. James will lead us in a couple of songs, and then Roye will come up and give us our lesson.
Number 247. Number 247. Here we are with string pilgrims. Sing all three verses. Here we are but straying pilgrims, here our path is often dim, but to cheer us on our journey still we sing this wayside hymn. Yonder over the rolling river where the shining mansions rise, soon will be our home forever, and the smile of the blessed giver gladdens all our longing eyes. Here our feet are 345. Sing the first, second, and last verse. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my Lord thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Though Satan should afflict, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control, that Christ hath regarded my helpless estate, and hath shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the veil shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. If you would please mark the invitation song in number 263. Number 263.
This is what they always hook on me when I go, do news interviews. Good evening. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Roye Cole, Service Sheriff here in Webster County. Hi, Linda. I recognize a lot of faces I haven't seen in a long time. I think some of you guys have been around for a while. I think maybe Grandpa Cole, Gid Cole, was one of the founding members here way back in the day. Is that correct? Who's been here the longest? Who's brave enough to? Who's been here more than 30, 40 years? Huh?
Joyce Regent's been on Earth about as long as that.
Well, I think Grandpa was one of the founding members here. He passed away a few years ago on us. Dwight asked me to speak, and he asked me to speak if I understand the topic correctly, because this can go several different directions, and I'm prepared for either one. but on law enforcement issues and how they kind of affect us today. Is that correct? Is that what you want to hear? So that is a super broad topic, and there's so many different ways that I would want to talk about that, because, you know, on a personal level, I want to talk about what it's like being a Christian in law enforcement, and you know, I guess since I'm not going that direction today, I will just put this out there. I think the hardest thing in the world to do is probably to convert a police officer. Are there any guesses why? Well, I think one of the hardest reasons why is because, you know, they serve a pretty hard job, right? And they're pretty well respected, especially in our areas. But you know, if everybody calls you a hero all day, why do you need a savior? And there's a mentality there where, because we're the good guys, that's good enough. And it makes it really hard to get officers to take that final step and go all the way into Christianity, because they're just known for being good guys. And you know, for most people, just being a good guy is good enough. And I don't think it is. I don't share that opinion. So that's one of the things that, you know, that I kind of wanted to talk about being in law enforcement. You know, there's other things too. I'll tell you what, it's hard on you. It's just extremely hard on you. I gave a prayer at the National Day of Prayer. They asked me to say a prayer at one of the churches, and they asked me to talk for a little bit. And I literally, the only thing I did was I just talked about, I don't know what day of the week, let's say it was a Thursday, but I just talked about what had happened on my Wednesday. And my Wednesday started, I serve on a task force for the Missouri Supreme Court. So I ran up to Jeff City, and I did the little thing that I do with them once a quarter, and then after that led into something where they wanted to talk to the governor. So I got to text Mike Parsons, said, Mike, I'm coming over, I got a problem. And you know what? I just walked in the front door. Mike used to be a sheriff. It's an easy one to do, right? But by the end of the day, I was covered in filth and other people's bloods, and I was sticking my head up in an attic by myself looking for a guy that was just shooting somebody else. Now that's just one day. Now if you can imagine all the phone calls and all the emergencies, the highs and lows, and that's just one day. Now granted, that is kind of an extreme day. I don't just walk into the governor's office every day, right? That doesn't happen a lot. Or talk to the Missouri Supreme Court. But it is something that happens on a regular basis, and it happens when you're not just a baseline police officer, but you're also elected and you're tied into those political ties. So I wear a lot of hats. So I end up sitting at a lot of tables. Well, that was one of those days. But one of the other things that's really difficult about law enforcement, and I just can't help but watch the show Longmire. I just love the show. And one of the reasons that I loved it so much was because the sheriff was working a murder. And at the same time, he got a phone call, which if you don't know the show, he doesn't carry a phone. Somebody gave him a phone. But he got totally chewed out because of some animal complaint, right? Somebody's chickens or something. Well, the point is that everybody we deal with, whatever we deal with, it is the biggest thing they got going. And it may be animals in the road, or it may be a dead body. But to them, it is number one. And if you don't treat it like it's number one, they don't think you're doing your job. But you're sitting here with a bigger view of the picture, realizing what is actually an emergency and what is not an emergency. And sometimes you have to deliver that message that doesn't always go over very well. But there's a lot of different directions that I kind of wanted to talk on today, and a 35-minute window didn't do it. So what I did was I decided to, and it also depended if some people were going to go with me. I was going to change subject matter. But so what I want to do, narrow down today, is I kind of want to talk about, let me talk about one more thing before I do that. We're going to talk about the inmates in the jail first, and criminology as a whole, and how it applies to the Bible or family relations. But man, I knew I'd lose my train of thought. Oh, the other thing that I can't miss the opportunity to talk about is just the basics. The system does work if it's used properly. We are to a point in time in our society where he gave the perfect example. We're literally to the point in our society where we blame the good guys for defending their own property. You know, if things don't go a little bit better, vigilantism will be kind of normal if we don't do a better job of justice. My best definition of justice I got from the Bible. What is justice? What is the best application of justice you can think of? Because I think people confuse them all the time. So the way I understand it, justice is an equal punishment to a crime or an equal reward to a good behavior. Justice is something that equalizes things exactly. Well, I believe in justice, but I believe in something else too. I believe in mercy. What is mercy? Now, they talk about this in the courtroom all the time, but I really don't think they know what it means. What is mercy? It's where you don't get what you should get. It's where you don't get justice. If you should have got a 10-year punishment and the judge shows mercy on you and gives you 8, you got 2 years mercy, right? Well, we don't think like that anymore. But when you go back to the root words of these words, they all come back from the Old Testament. They all go back to the Bible, and our founding fathers tried to apply those same fundamentals and those same principles into our system, the idea of right and wrong, and letting a judge decide between the balance of justice and mercy. The judge is the one that should decide that. They do a good job, by the way. What doesn't happen is whatever the judge decides, that doesn't get executed. So if a judge tells somebody they get 10 years in prison, that doesn't happen. On average, it's anywhere from 10 to 15% of whatever they say. And if they committed 5 burglaries and they get 5 years apiece, they're going to get one 5-year sentence. And of that 5-year sentence, they'll probably serve 10 or 20%. Now, there's exceptions and all that stuff. But as a general rule, you need to know that's why the system's not working. That's one of the major reasons the system is struggling right now, is because we don't believe in justice anymore. We blame everything else. And regardless of what there is to blame, if a person had a choice, they should be accountable for that choice, and the only person that should decide that is the judge. Everybody else gets to weigh in their opinion, but the judge should be the one to decide, not somebody up in Jeff City that kind of reviews it later and then makes a decision without having the witnesses and the victims and all that stuff so they understand how it applies. So clearly I bored you all with that. Okay, so you guys laugh, but that's the reason I was up in Jeff City talking to the Supreme Court and talking to the governors, because I want what's called truth in sentencing. It is the number one issue that affects our society at this time. It is the number one issue. If we do not have truth in sentencing, you will continue to see things erode. We just need to bring it back and let the judges make the decisions, whatever they say goes. Okay, so what I did today, and this is something that I'd wanted to do for a really long time, and as we do this exercise, I want you to think about the book of Proverbs, and I want you to think of any proverbs that may apply as we discuss some of these issues. So what I did, and I've always wanted to do this, and finally this was my excuse to do it. I've always wanted to go survey my inmates. I always wanted to just go do a survey, walk in there, talk to them and say, hey, I'm doing this survey, will you fill it out? And so you can see the questions that I wanted to ask. All right, so the verse that I thought of that I wanted to talk about, of course, was Proverbs chapter 22:6. Everybody understands this. What is it? Train up a child when he is old, and when he was old, he will not depart from it. Right? Now that verse sometimes throws people off because they're like, well, I raised my kid right, and they didn't turn out right. And why is that? You weren't the only one training them. They were getting influences from all kinds of places, right? If you raise a kid just perfect, they're going to turn out just perfect. But the problem is we're not the only one raising our kids. Our kids have influences beyond our comprehension all the time. You have no idea what's coming through them on this. You have no idea what influence they have at school. They're not going to come home and tell you all that. You don't know who they're running with all the time. You do your best to stay in the loop. But if they were trained up perfect, they'd turn out pretty good. All right. So with that verse in mind, that's the first one I thought of. First question. So this is a survey. There were probably 85 people in the jail that I went and did a survey on today. And I said, hey, you can take it or not take it. If you don't want to take it, you can tell me to buzz off. So there were 85 of them. First guess, how many people think did the survey? About 50, mid-50s, we'll say. And they didn't answer every question. So some questions, maybe 51 people answered it. Other questions, maybe 55. But I walked in there and talked to them and visited with them, which is something I do on a regular basis. When you're the sheriff, you don't just do patrol and investigations. You also run a jail. You're also in charge of civil process. We have school resource officers. We have a very broad range of things that we handle. So question number 1, are your parents married? I believe the breakdown of the American family is one of the largest indicators of crime. You can do a Google search it any way you want. Absent fathers are one of the number 1 indicators that people ended up in prison. So the first question I asked was, are your parents married? Give me some guesses. What do you think? What percentage of the inmates in jail parents were married? Carrie? What? Huh?
I said 5%.
5 of them were married. It's a little higher. 15, you're pretty close. I think it was no, I'm sorry. I was going to put this up on the board, and when I went home, I thought I had PowerPoint on my home computer, and I do, but it's through the internet, not through, so I couldn't combine my 2 surveys, so they're on my phone, so I'm sorry. 71% of the inmates in my facility today, their parents are not married. So then I asked them, how many of you all are married to your first spouse? Any guesses? How many people in jail right now are married to their first wife or husband? Any other guesses? 30? What? 10? Pretty close. 8% of the people in jail, in my jail today, are married to their first spouse. So then I asked another question. Number 3, I asked 16 questions. Number 3 was, who spent the most time raising you if they were separated? Mother, father, other. And I'll just tell you that one so we don't go through the guessing game. But 32% of people were mostly raised by their mother. 17 were mostly raised by their father. And then the rest of them were other. Right? So of the people in jail, 32% of them were raised by their mother, 17% were by their father. Those are the ones of the parents that were separated. So then I asked them another question, because I think our teachers probably have the best guess as to which kids are going to end up in jail or not. So I asked, were you well behaved and were you well disciplined in 6th grade? Now this is according to them. Did they feel that they were well disciplined in 6th grade? And they gave me a much higher answer than I thought. They said 75% of them said that they were well behaved and disciplined in 6th grade. And I don't believe that in the slightest. I asked them if they have been closely associated with illegal drug use for most of their life. So for most of their life, were you closely associated with drug use? Any guesses? Uh-oh. Pardon? It was 75%. So 75%, according to them, were closely associated to drug use their whole life. The guess of their first known criminal act, what age do you think that was, according to them? Their first known criminal act, 13?
16.
16?
13, 12.
They went with 17 is what they said. I asked a similar question. So what age did you first find an illegal act involving drugs or alcohol? And they averaged out 18. Kind of a similar question. So I asked them the first asked them the first drug they used, and that included alcohol. So what they said was 18% of them said meth, 47% of them said marijuana, 4% said crack, 10% said alcohol, then there was like 2% speed and 2% opioids. So you guys know what opioids are? These are prescription drugs, but they also get lumped into heroin. The phrase opioid has now become like a personal pet peeve of mine. Because we want to use it in political circles. What I've noticed in politics is people take words and they hijack them and they make them mean multiple things at once. Okay? Heroin is an opioid. Prescription drugs are an opioid. The consequences, how they got them, the legality of them are all different between a prescription drug and heroin, right? But they want to lump them in together and talk about an opioid epidemic. Guys, here's how the drug world went. When I first got elected, everybody had a mom and pop meth shop. It was everywhere. Now farther into the career, all those are gone. I've probably seen 2 meth labs in the last few years. All the meth comes from Mexico. I can count on one hand how many times I've actually seen heroin in Webster County. So, remember like 5 years ago, that's all you heard about was heroin was coming. And there is some, but I see it just minutely compared to meth. Meth is still predominantly what we deal with on a regular basis. But the reason I say that is that the opioid epidemic is real, but it's 2 different epidemics, right? And they're using that as one more way to keep from punishing people. They want to look at it like, well, we just need to get treated, or it's grandma's fault because she had medicine. That is not the problem, right? And according to the people in jail, 2% of them actually started on opioids, right? That's not how it worked. What? Fentanyl's probably the deadliest right now because you don't know what you're getting, What? Well, illegal drug use is the #1 killer of people under the age of 55 in the United States. Now, I watched all the precautions we took for COVID, but that didn't touch being the #1 killer in the United States. It was illegal drug use, not alcohol overdoses, not prescription drug. Illegal drug use is the #1 killer of people under the age of 55 in the United States. According to my last month Google search and the Google search the year before and the Google search the year before, and for as long as I've been talking about truth in sentencing. And the reason that I focused on that is because people throw out political phrases like non-violent. Granted, drugs are generally non-violent, but they're not non-dangerous. There isn't anything more dangerous, but we don't want to punish. We're adverse to punishing anymore. We don't want justice. That's a punishment, right? So I know I'm kind of old school, but I believe all people are motivated both by the carrot and by the whip. We're motivated by a good reward, and we're motivated by being afraid of a punishment. I don't know anybody who's not, right? We all are. That's normal. Sorry, I got a new phone yesterday. I don't know how to use it. One of the other things I asked, were any of your siblings molested or abused by a non-caretaker? And that was 29%. One of the things I was curious about was, did you play on a sports team all the way through high school? I was just curious, because I thought sports was pretty helpful to teach you social skills and following the rules. They said only 27% of them played sports all through school. And I actually believe that's probably too high, but that's what they said. Here's another one I just don't believe. I said, did you attend religious services every week from the ages of 13 to 18? What do you think they said? 10%. Huh?
10%.
What percent of them?
10.
That's probably what I think was actually true, but that's not what they said. What do you think they said? Huh? Probably 50. And what the stories you normally hear when you go and interview inmates is, my grandma always took me. It's never I went with mom and dad, it's always grandma always took me. That family unit was broken and it's hard. And I'm not picking on anybody, because I came from a home where my folks were divorced, and there's a lot of us that did. I wonder if I turn it this way, I can see it better. I'm sorry, I really should have got it up on the board. So then I asked them, previous to your incarceration, did you attend weekly service? What do you think they said? So at the time you were arrested, did you attend weekly worship? What do you think they said? 2%. 2? 0? Well, they weren't listening if they did. 4%. Huh? 4%. 4. Their answer was 50%. So 50% of them said they were going to church on Sunday or ended up in prison the week before. That does happen, but I don't think it's 50%. One of the things that I kind of learned doing this, or working, in the facility, you learn that they really like to glorify things. Maybe we all do. So they will exaggerate the good, but they will also exaggerate the bad, because exaggerating the bad is more of a story for them to tell. Sometimes it makes them more relatable, but they will also do the same. I was looking on I'll come back to that here in a little bit. But anyway, 50% of them said they were going to church. And I will tell you something that does happen. Now, this is true. I don't know the crowd. I don't know who's been in jail or what have you. But in our jail, those guys and girls that are in there, by the time they come out, they know their Bible. I mean, we have 32 ministers that go into a jail. I only have 96 general population beds, but I have 32 ministers that are signed up. For example, the Marshville Church of Christ, I think, has got 25 of them. And they go in there every single Sunday. We have 5 different pods, and those ministers go in there and have Bible studies. And so there's a lot of free time in there. They really learn their Bible, and some of them follow it. I think we've had 100 baptisms in our jail. 90, no, it's over 100 now, because we've been doing it for a couple years now. There's been a lot of baptism. There's a lot more Bible studies in our jail than there is in most churches. That's a fact. That's a fact. Well, to convert people, you have to reach people in their time of need. You're not going to go convert people that are having a great day. That's not how it works. You have to go where the hurt is. You got to go where the hurt is and show the answer. Or, if nothing else, you just got to be a good ear and listen and be there for them. Right? When people are lonely, they need somebody. And that's your best chance to teach them about Christ. I asked them if they graduated college, and 16% claimed that they did. I asked, were you ever referred to the juvenile office? And 27% said they did. And I don't believe that either. But here's what is, again, pretty telling, similar with the first question. Who was the biggest influence in your life? And it was moms. 37% were moms. And keep in mind, probably 80% of the people in jail are men, or 85%. So you moms have a big effect on them boys, right? And then 31% said their dad, and then again but that was not who raised you, that was who had the biggest influence on your life. So I took a couple takeaways from that, and one of which I know for a fact a lot of those answers are not true, and I know some got left blank and things like that. But I don't know. I think the fact of the matter is the same issues that they're dealing with are the same issues that the rest of us are dealing with. I believe it's absolutely true. I just think oftentimes we have a little bit better discipline and a little bit better answers, and it makes it a whole lot easier to stay out of trouble. I believe that to be the case. We pick better friends, we run in better circles, and so it makes the temptation less. But if we were walking in their shoes with the same situation, we'd be inclined to do some of the very same things. And you guys can pretend you're not. But had you been down that same road, you'd be tempted to do the exact same things. And you know why? Because you're human, right? And that dopamine, that feel-good thing in your brain is a temptation, and we all have it. So don't come across too judgmental, because if it wasn't for your raising and some of your environment, you might be surprised where you would be. So what type of law enforcement questions do you have for me on those lines? I expected that one to take longer, but I didn't want to sit there and make you guess every question on each one. Yeah, Missouri's it's an open carry. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you have to be very careful what you do, but you could be in the same boat as the guys with the broomsticks if you used a gun.
Yeah, I'll give you the rule of thumb. Don't shoot anybody unless you're defending your person or somebody else's person, right? One of the things that I deal with a lot in the third-class county is everybody, you know, well, not anymore, but everybody used to be a farmer, or they were at least raised by farmers. You know, most farmers are going to shoot somebody stealing their cows. Don't go shoot somebody for stealing your cows. Now, if you want to confront them and they hurt you, fine, what have you. But I've done that before, and that's not something you want to be a part of. Go ahead.
Are you more afraid today than you were 20 years ago when you pulled somebody over?
When I pull somebody over? No, not really. So I was elected 15 years ago. I didn't give any of my history to you. When I was 16, I was a police cadet, and I've worn a badge basically ever since. Oh, Linda, Nicole, and Dwayne and Samuels, they would remember me when I was a kid wearing a badge going around. And then I worked with Phyllis. Where's Phyllis at? Worked with her at Drury for 4 years as a security guard there, and that's when I went to the police academy. I have my undergrad's in psychology and criminology there from Drury, and then I finished my master's degree in business back in 2011. But nonetheless, I've always worn a badge. I don't hardly know any different. But I don't, you know, as the times have changed in terms of making a traffic stop, no, not really. Most traffic stops are pretty good. Now, I am afraid of cars. I would not be a good trooper. Like, I hate pulling people over. I mean, I'm afraid of getting run over. So I'll pull them over on a gravel road. You can speed by me on the interstate, I don't care. I hate pulls. But in terms of getting assaulted like that, no, not really. No. Ron?
What age group are in prison, basically 20 to 40, 20 to 40 to 50, or any certain age?
All I can do is guess. So my guess would be anywhere from you can't hardly get people to stay in jail for a long time, right? So you put them in, they get probation, 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 probation. So that's kind of the problem. So it's normally up in years before they actually serve any prison time. There are exceptions, but generally what happens, somebody gets arrested, stays in a jail. So a jail is designed for misdemeanors. Punishment 1 year or less, or $1,000 fine is a misdemeanor. Prison is supposed to be for felonies, punishment of 1 year or more in prison. Well, what happens is everything gets pled down, and they get a misdemeanor sentence instead of felony sentence, and then they end up getting, some type of probation. So I guess what I'm rambling to say this. The answer to your question is different. The age of people in jail is generally just a touch lower. The age of people in prison is probably a little bit higher because some of them do have the longer sentences. Does that make sense?
Over time, have you been able to make any judgment about, well, there must be variation in prison and jail population. Could you make a generalization about the type of social or political conditions that would cause population to rise?
Well, breakdown of the American family is number one. Drugs is number two. Politically speaking, no. I don't poll them on who they're voting for. And they're felons. They can't vote for me anyway. So what do I? I'm just kidding. No, I really don't. I really don't. So in our county, I think it's probably 70-30 Republican Democrat. I would venture to say the jail population's similar. I don't know though. What else can I tell you? Ma'am, what's your name?
I'm
Cindy
Cindy Walters.
Walters.
Yes. This is something I've been concerned about for quite a while. I want to know what you think about the legalization of recreational marijuana and what we as a society need to do. Because it looks like that's where we're going.
Well, yeah, it's legal. I think most of the people that wanted to do it are primarily already doing it. I can't even pretend that I've seen any difference at all at this point because I haven't. And it's been legal for a year or so. I think the ones that wanted to smoke weed were already smoking weed. Do I worry about the long-term consequences? I do, as it becomes more socially acceptable. There is and I can't speak as an expert on this because I am not one, but I understand that it does have that marijuana is like one of those deals where some people can smoke it forever and there's just no side effects and what have you, and then there's another group of people that go through it and they end up with all kinds of side effects, like paranoid schizophrenia and things like that. I'm not an expert in the field on that. That's probably more of a doctor question in terms of what would happen to your person. But I always worry about everything so often is a direction. And what direction I do not want to see is a bunch of other illegal drugs made legal. And that scares me a lot. I mean, Oregon and some of these places have done that, and they're just... It's very, very tempting. You got a sin in your life, ma'am? You struggle with it? Because it's tempting, right? And you're an adult woman, and you're probably still dealing with that sin. Well, drugs are the same way. That temptation's going to be there. It's not going to go away. And the more we give people access to it, the harder it's going to be to get off of that. So I want to limit as much access as possible. You are never going to eliminate the demand once it's started. So you're also never, let me say, demand is addressed one individual at a time, and supply is, of course, one dealer at a time. Never mind. I was going to go a different direction with that, but never mind. Mm-hmm.
He said he'd rather deal with people that are on marijuana than alcohol. Do you find that too? He said they're a little more subdued or whatever with the alcohol.
Probably a little more easygoing.
Alcohol people are more belligerent and want to fight you.
Yeah, it's probably true, I would think, a little bit. So, but I wouldn't want to be in between a guy and his joint. You know, a guy that's been addicted to that and looking forward to it. I wouldn't want to be in between him and that.
What's the biggest spiritual need of officers and how can we as John Q citizens address that?
Gee, well, hit close to home.
I will repeat that so everybody...
Okay, so his question is, what is the biggest spiritual need for officers? And that was a direction that I really wanted to go, and actually had put some PowerPoints together, but it hits me close to home, so I try not to cry when I talk about it, right? So it's difficult because you're in a position, you know, when I told you a story earlier about how things just change, you know, you're in the governor's office one day, and by the end of it, you're in an attic and dealing with all, you know, switching gears really wears people down. If you're in the governor's office all day, it wouldn't be a big deal, would it? If you were just doing warrant arrests all day, you kind of get used to it. One of the hardest things for us is the switching of gears constantly, right? So as I stood up here, I took a call from a lady whose daughter's been missing for about 24 hours. It looks suspicious, could be a murder, might just be a missing person on a drug bender, don't know. But just the constant switching gears all the time wears you down. So I think all of us deal with a little bit of that, just stress and anxiety that kind of overwhelms you. And then, it's a combination of the same thing that everybody else is dealing with, but also having trouble relating sometimes. In terms of spiritual need, I mean, you know the answer to that, you know, because all of my needs are the same as yours. But I think our temptations are a little different. We're just constantly, my name gets dropped like you wouldn't believe. That's hard on me. People associate me with power. I've heard more things about myself than I could ever, I mean, it'll just drive you nuts. So you have to deal with that, and then you have to go and try to make a difference. That stresses me out. But probably this spiritual need, it's so broad of a question, but I think it would, I'm trying to think of how to answer that question. You know, are you saying like the remedy, like do they need prayers, or are you saying what can you do for them, or are you saying, what do you ask? Narrow it down a little more than spiritual need, because that's a very broad one. It's hard to know what you could do other than support and listen, you know. But they're not, you know, generally speaking, most officers are not going to talk to a stranger, you know. Most officers are pretty guarded. But I do think one of the things that really helps us is when you give us the benefit of the doubt and support us. Every video that you ever see about some officer beating somebody up on YouTube, Turns out later there's more to the story, and before you formulate your opinion, you should probably see the rest of it. But I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Because, I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, I guess. So, did I run out of time? Oh. I didn't even know what time it was. Oh, yeah, 7:45. Huh? I get paroled?
Yes.
Would you like me to offer you an invitation?
Well,
Or you got one? Or are we done?
I would say that we need to be done.
Okay.
Because the second bell means that you have children in classes who may need to get picked up. And my wife has done enough Wednesday teaching that if they don't get picked up, then some teachers get irritable. I have encountered that before. Thank you for coming. And I'm sure there would have been more questions, but we have 45 minutes. Let's pray. Dear God, we are thankful for today. We're thankful that Roye came. We all have questions. Most of us at one time or another have been stopped for speeding or something else, and we have noted without fail how cordial and polite those officers are. Yet sometimes they stop someone and things go south in a hurry. We're glad we don't have jobs like that, but we're thankful that people like Roye and others are willing to do them. We pray that you'll bless us the rest of this week. Help us to be the people you want us to be. Help us to pray for those who are incarcerated, who are missing family, missing all sorts of activities in their lives. They're there for a reason, we understand that. But we know, Father, that you love them and you wish the best for them, just as you do for us. We thank you, Father, for being with us today. Help us to rest well tonight. Have a good day tomorrow. Be with Rosemary's family. And especially now be with Pat Roberts. We pray. In Jesus' name, amen.